Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the deep and often invisible psychological wounds left on an entire nation after the October 7th attacks in Israel. We're going to unpack some really comprehensive research from Ariel University to understand how societies respond to a crisis of this magnitude.
So right off the bat, here's the central question we're going to explore. It's a real paradox, isn't it? This was a trauma that didn't just hit the people in the direct line of fire. It sent shockwaves across the whole society, creating this shared national wound. How does that even happen?
Well, let's start with this staggering number. In the key study we're looking at today, a whopping 88.3% of Israelis were not directly exposed to the attacks. They weren't physically there. And yet, as the data is about to show us, the nation as a whole was thrown into a state of profound distress. And that, right there, is where our story really begins.
Okay, so how does a trauma expand so far, so fast, like ripples in a pond? Well, the answer lies in a single, really powerful concept.
And that concept is called collective trauma. You see, this isn't about individual exposure in the way we usually think about it. It's about a shared national identity, this deep feeling that this happened to us. And that feeling gets amplified by a constant stream of information through media, creating a wound that's felt by the entire group.
So let's actually look at the price tag. Let's dig into the data, because these numbers, they paint a really powerful picture of a nation's mental health pushed to the absolute brink.
Just look at this. In only 1 month following the attacks, the rate of probable post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, nearly doubled across the entire country. It shot up from about 16% to almost 30%. That is a massive psychological footprint on a national scale.
And the numbers for depression, they tell a similar story. You add up the people with medium and high symptoms, and you find that over half the population, 53%, was experiencing moderate to severe depression. This wasn't some fringe issue. It was a mainstream, national experience.
And all of this psychological distress, it just seeped right into the fabric of daily life. You've got nearly half the population dealing with intrusive memories. But honestly, the figure that just floors me is this one. 72% of people reported actively planning self-defense strategies. That shows a fundamental collapse in the most basic sense of personal safety.
Now, this kind of toll, it doesn't just mess with individuals. It also started to create these deep cracks in society. And it all revolved around one fundamental idea: trust. I mean, the ripple effect was just so clear. Half the country saw their performance at work or school drop. Over 60% felt it was damaging their relationships with family and friends. The research draws a straight line from this collective trauma to a major disruption in people's ability to just function.
And that brings us to another really critical idea: betrayal trauma. See, the research found that the injury wasn't just from the external attack itself. A huge part of the trauma actually came from this internal feeling of being failed, of being let down by the very institutions and leaders who were supposed to protect them.
And this right here created a fascinating paradox. On one hand, you had faith in political institutions, the courts, the media. It just plummeted. But at the same time, trust in the security forces, the military and the police, the people on the front lines, it stayed incredibly high, up around 75 to 80%. You can see this clear divide forming between the political and the operational.
But that is not the whole story. Not even close. Because right alongside all of this deep trauma, the research found these powerful sources of resilience that are just as important for us to understand.
So, what was it that protected people? Well, the key thing here is that it wasn't just about individual psychology. Sure, personal hope and believing in your own strength were important, but they were massively amplified by social support, by family, friends, and the wider community. Resilience, it turns out, was a team sport.
And get this, a huge majority, 79% of Israelis, chose to describe their own society not as victims, but with these really powerful, empowering labels. They were actively shaping the story they told themselves, about themselves, in real time. These were the identities they chose for themselves. And this wasn't just, feel-good talk. The study actually found that adopting these positive labels, seeing yourself and your community as survivors or warriors or victors,
was an incredibly effective psychological tool. It actively reduced distress, it lowered fear, and it created a sense of agency in a situation that felt utterly powerless.
So, what are we supposed to take away from this incredibly complex picture? On one hand, you have a nation grappling with a deep collective trauma. And on the other, you have this powerful collective resilience existing side by side.
And in the end, this is the profound question that the research leaves us with. It really highlights this unresolved tension between a society's deep, deep wounds and its profound, almost innate strength to heal. It's a battle between trauma and resilience that is still being waged, not just in the headlines, but in the minds and hearts of millions.